In 1982, when one of my twin brothers, Arvel, passed away, I started thinking that we should write the history of our family, the Stricklins. Arvel played a large part in my life, and now he was gone. At that time, I didn't discuss it or mention it to anyone. I was busy growing my own business, which I'd started in December of 1977. After my oldest brother, Clyde, passed away in January of 1994, I was reminded again of how much our story needed to be told. 17 years older than me, he had been the person in my family who had made the greatest impact on my early life. Still just a thought, I continued to keep it to myself, not discussing it or mention it to anyone. I didn't seriously think about a story of our family until after Harville, my other twin brother, had passed away June 28 of 2004. Later, I thought there should be a story of some type of record to pass on to the Stricklin kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and future generations. I talked to Louise, my sister, about it, and she said she had already made some notes about her childhood and our family. She also had the black and white photo albums from my mom's collections. We both agreed that a story of our family should be written. Since she was 10 years older than I, we decided that she would write the years of the 1930s and 40s. She had more knowledge, memories, and experiences about the World War II period up till 1945. And after that, I would write mine. I asked Danny, my oldest son, if he would visit with each member of the family and write down what they could remember that could be added to the Stricklin story. He visited my sister-in-law, Margaret, my brother, Harville, and my sister, Louise, but I didn't get very much information from them, Clyde especially, since he was the oldest of the Stricklin siblings. I wish we could have gotten his slant on the parts of our history, but I didn't. I decided I'd write what I could remember about my early childhood growing up in Fort Worth, and the parts I could remember about living in the North Side in the Roseland Heights area and some of the war years, and finish with the River Oaks period from 1941 to 1948. Continuing with my life, I would write some of the history of my marriage to Janine Williams that began on November the 18th, 1950, and lasted for almost 70 years, until Janine passed away on May 2nd, 2020. This story is the highlights of Dan Stricklin Sr.'s family and our 5 children and the places that we lived over the years. This is a story I could never imagine living. As a young boy in the north side of Fort Worth, I would never have dreamed that my life would become what it did. After working 24/7 for 50 years in the grocery business, I'm now a retired old man. I began this story when I was 83, writing from our home in Tyler. And through the years, I added as time went on until 2020, when my beloved wife of almost 70 years, Janine, passed. Realizing I could not complete the story by myself, I asked our oldest daughter, Denny, to work with me and finish it. Here's my story. Recollections of my childhood. I'm blessed to have had a loving and caring mom and dad, parents that set good examples, a mother and father that lived by their Christian beliefs and passed them along to each one of us. They had strong values, high morals, and character. They taught us to be responsible and accountable for our actions and respect our elders. They band us together with their love, beliefs, and teachings, which shaped our character and our faith in God. Family is what matters in life. North Fort Worth and River Oaks. These are the places that evoke fond memories of my family and the places we lived with my mom, dad, and my sister and 3 brothers. Many of our relatives live close by. Some of this story is about our relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, and the neighborhood, including the stockyards, churches, grade schools, the grocery store we shopped at, the filling stations, department stores such as Leonard's Brothers, the picture shows, and the Turner Elementary School grounds on Azle Avenue, and the 3 houses that we lived in while I was growing up. It's also about River Oaks and the country life, such as horse riding around the area of River Oaks and crossing the Trinity River on a horse, and cows and the Rockwood Golf Course, Jacksboro Highway, the gambling joints, the Rocket Club, Rockwood Grocery Store, Bud's Eat Shop on 183, Castleberry School, swimming at Burgers Lake, Inspiration Point, Hales Half Acre, Lake Worth and the Casino Club and Beach, Consolidated Aircraft Plant, and many more things, people, places, and incidents. My parents and early childhood. William Bud Stricklin and Jimmy Chenault were married April the 12th, 1912. As parents, they lived through some very difficult times. Growing a family during the Great Depression was not an easy task. The Great Depression didn't end until well after World War II was over, and the hundreds of thousands of troops came home.
These proceedings are closed.
My mom and dad, as parents, always found a way of seeing that as a family, we never suffered. My parents suffered, but we didn't know about it until later years. My dad was the biggest-hearted person in the world. He would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. His love of family is what I would call tough love. You knew he loved you, but he didn't always like to show it outwardly. He could also be a gentle, kind person. Swift & Company and the Stockyards. My dad worked for Swift Company for 28 years. He was a foreman on the second floor of the meat plant called the Smokehouse. The entire floor was the area where all hams, bacon, and other meats were cured and smoked. Daddy would take me to the stockyards where he had calves pinned up waiting for sale. It's ironic that my oldest son, Dan Jr., would one day own and operate a grocery store just one block from all of this. In 1935, when he was 46 years old, he had to retire because of a heart condition, and I was only 2 years old. His pension was only $36 a month. Comparing our family to today's standard of living, you could say we were poor, but we had everything we needed. We were just an average family, like many families living in the Rosen Heights neighborhood on the north side of Fort Worth. Memories of my mom and dad, my 3 brothers, and my sister were loving and pleasant memories. They led a simple life. We cared for one another. Being the youngest, I learned something from each one of them and have carried that memory throughout my life. I was born at home at 2500 Northwest 27th Street, Fort Worth, Texas, January the 27th, 1932. My earliest memories were at about 5 years of age. I was born late in my parents' life. My dad was 43 years old, my mom 41. My sister, Louise, was closest in range, being 10 years apart. By the time I was born, my brothers were almost gone. Clyde was 17 years old, and he had married Inez in 1933, a year after I was born. Harville and Arville, my twin brothers, were 14 years older and were starting to date by the time I was 3 years old. Arville married Margaret Abernathy in 1939, and Harville married Bessie Jo James in 1940. Louise married Bob Walters in 1942, but continued to live at the house because Bob was one of the first to ship overseas at the start of World War II. During this time, we had moved into our new house that Dad built in River Oaks. My growing up and memories of our family were somewhat different because I was much younger than my brothers. The house where I was born, on the north side of Fort Worth, in an area called Rosen Heights. We were about a mile or so from the stockyards. The house was on the corner lot of 27th Grayson Street. My mom was a loving and caring mother. She was also quiet, gentle, and a reserved person. Her appearance was always immaculate. She may not have had expensive clothes, but you would always find her well-groomed. Mama was a devout Christian, a charter member of the Church of Christ on Azle Avenue, and a faithful churchgoer. She read the Bible every day. She would take me with her to church every Sunday and on nights that she attended. She taught me to sing many of the gospel songs. 2 of the songs that I remember most were my favorite, How Beautiful Heaven Must Be, and When We All Get to Heaven. She also taught me the books of the New Testament. By the time I was 9 years old, I could recite 27 books of the Bible from memory. I loved hanging around in the kitchen when she was baking cakes and pies because she would let me lick any unused cake icing in her mixing bowl. My favorite cake that my mama baked was a chocolate cake with white icing. She only baked this cake for special occasions. We ate a lot of red beans 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes we'd have homemade soup or a stew made from homegrown vegetables canned in a ball quart jar. In 1938, Dad bought a service station and garage. It was located on the corner of Grayson Street and Azle Avenue, just one block down the street from our house. The gas station faced Azle Avenue. Attached to the north side of the building was a two-door car garage and auto repair shop. Also in front was a Coca-Cola box filled with miscellaneous drinks, ice, and water. When you reached in to get a soda, the water was so cold your hands would get numb searching for the drink of your choice. I remember the period when Harville and Arville were living at home, but it's vague. They worked at Dad's filling station after school. Harville was dating Bessie Jo and Arville dated Margaret. They both sung in church and at home and sang gospel and Western songs. In 1933, when he was 18 years old, Clyde married Inez. He had the look of a young Clark Gable and a personality to go with it. His dress was like that of a movie star. I was introduced to the grocery business at a very young age. I was only 8 years old while we still lived on 27th Street. As I grew up, I tried to emulate Clyde. He was my idol. His being in the grocery business was what made a natural career choice for me. We were surrounded by relatives on the north side. Next door was my grandmother, who was my daddy's mother. Across the street lived Aunt Alma and Uncle Marvin Stricklin and their son W.M. Alma was Dad's sister. West of us on the same street was Aunt Ola and Uncle Lonzo and their son Jerry. Ola was my mom's sister. Living next door to us was my grandmother, Sarah Rachel Chaplin Stricklin. I will never forget her. She will always be in my memories. My grandmother, Mammy, as we used to all call her, was a loving and passionate person. If I was in trouble, I went to her. She was my protector and my only grandparent I ever knew. When I did something wrong and knew I'd get a whipping, Mammy's house is where I would go. My dad would come looking, and I'd get behind Mammy and she would say, "Bud, you're not going to whip this boy today." And he wouldn't say a thing. He would just leave and forget about it. My grandmother would read books to me and tell me stories. She also taught me to play Chinese checkers, and we'd play checkers for hours, and she never seemed to get tired of it. She always had fresh-baked cookies around to eat, and if she had advice, it was dip and snuff. I remember a large brass spittoon that she used to spit into. It was always handy. And she didn't have running water in the house. There was a faucet outside near her back porch door. Water had to be hauled into the house for drinking, cooking, and bathing. And there was no bathroom in the house. The toilet was an outhouse on the back of the lot. My grandmother lived in that house for 47 years. Over the years, every time I came to visit Mom, I would go by and see Mammy. After Janine and I were married and started a family, we would take our kids to visit her. I hope some of them remember those visits. As she became older, she did not change much. She would always have that same sweet smile and cheerful attitude. I will always love her. She was my only living grandparent I ever knew. Sarah Rachel Chaplin Stricklin died July 27, 1957. She lived to be 91.